Seam lines are the lines, spaces, and gaps between two pieces of a kit. Some models are designed to help hide these, but can be really obvious on others, even to the point where they detract from the look or cause it to fall apart easily. This is even more so on organic looking kits like Girlpla kits. In this tutorial, I'll be going over the various ways to fix and remove these, starting with the basics of using thick and thin glue to remove seam lines on well-fitted parts, followed by how to fix gaps you might have missed or fix scratches and dents when building it. Then I'll explain how to make runner or sprue putty and how to use it to fill in the bigger gaps. Lastly, I'll talk about how I combine these steps to remove all the seam lines on a kit. If you want to jump to any particular step, I have bookmarks in the description. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please don't forget to like and subscribe, since it really helps out this channel. Ask me any questions in the comments, as I'd love to help you out any way I can. Let's get started. We'll first go over the common scenario for two well-fitted parts. This is when the parts fit closely and seam lines aren't too bad. I'm going to show you how to fix this with both thin and thick polystyrene glue. These common types of glue melt the plastic instead of just bonding them together. Take the kit apart as much as possible. For joints like the arm, pay attention to the space around any moving parts, like a joint. Glue will spread, so if the space is tight, you might have issues. We'll start off showing how to use the thick glue. Just apply this amply to the outer edges. This method can be a bit messy, so watch out for your fingers. Just give it a few seconds so the glue can melt the plastic a bit before pushing it together. Look for the melted glue to squeeze out. If you don't get any, don't worry too much. I'll go over how to fix that up in a bit. After pushing together, check any moving parts by moving them around. Next, I'm going to show you how to use the thin glue. This is what I prefer since it is less messy. We're going to rely on the thin glue spreading itself out between the pieces. The key is to have the right amount of space. The secret is use the hobby knife to make the perfect gap. I usually apply quite a lot. I keep applying it until I can see it filling the gap. By that point, it's usually been enough time to melt the plastic. However, if you want to wait a few more seconds, it won't hurt. Just keep applying a few drops until you can easily see it filling the gap. When you push it together, you get the same melted glue squeeze. Regardless of the type of glue you use, wait a good 20 hours for it to dry properly. Both of these methods are melting a lot of plastic, and you will need them dry and solid. With them fully dry, now you need to sand it down. If you want to cut it away with a hobby knife, you can. Skin-colored ABS plastic is usually soft, so I generally start with a 400 grit sandpaper sponge. Use a soft sponge sandpaper so you don't flatten or harm the organic shape of your kit. It doesn't take much effort to sand down these parts. Once you see the gaps go away, wipe it off and move on to the 800 grit to see where you are at. At this point, you might be done. If you still see gaps or scratches, that leads us to our next part. It's pretty quick and easy fixing any small gap or scratches that are left over from seamline removal. First step is to start softening the troubled areas by putting some thin glue on it. Using a hobby knife, shave off some small bits from the runner with the same color. If you don't have a runner, you can always shave some off from the inside the part that isn't seen. Collect these so you don't lose them, and don't mix them with other plastic colors. Drop some more glue on the target area. Then, while the brush is still a bit wet, use it to lift out and put the shavings on the target area. Position it with a hobby knife or a toothpick. Once you have it covering the hole or a scratch, apply more glue on top of it. Keep trying to make sure it is covering the part you really want to fix. In about 10 seconds or so, the shaving will start becoming really soft. Once it starts to soften, use your hobby knife or toothpick to start squashing and spreading the shaving around. Keep repeating, applying more glue or shavings as needed. If the hobby knife shavings are a bit too big for what you need, you can always use a scraper to get and use smaller pieces. These scraper shavings are thin enough that they melt really quickly, and you can fill in the gaps without much issue. Wait about 10 minutes for it to dry, and then sand it down and repeat as needed. The last technique is how to fill in the big gaps. I'm going to demonstrate on the space found on the back of this kit. As with any seamline removal, start by trying to isolate the location as much as possible. We're going to be making a putty of sorts from the runner the pieces came from. Start off by chopping off as many small bits as you can. I usually go for about twice the amount I really need to fill in the space. Put them in a small glass bottle. Now pour some of the glue into the bottle. I always use thick glue for this. Start with going for less at the beginning. You can always add more later. Over the course of about 20 hours, glue will be melting the plastic bits. It's better to have the mixture a little bit too thick than thin. If you find it too thick and pasty, you can always add a bit more glue later. Once the plastic is fully melted, you'll have a putty you can work with. Use something like a toothpick to press and apply it into the space you want to fill. Take your time. If you use the thick glue, wait for about 20 hours for it to fully dry. I always side with caution and wait longer. Once dried, you can treat it just like any well-fitted seamline removal. Remove any excess with a hobby or ceramic knife if you so desire. Then start with a 400 grit soft sandpaper, sponge, or stick. Follow this by 800 grit to finish it off. If there are any missing parts or holes, you can apply more putty or use the previous method using the small thin shaving. Just remember to remove the putty by following the 400 to 800 and maybe even 1000 grit sandpaper. With this method, any huge gap will be gone. Now, let me run through how I use the previous techniques for the rest of the kit. The sides of the body here are pretty well fitted, so I use the thin glue technique. I made a space the size of a hobby blade and applied the thin flow type glue. The sides of the torso are pretty visible, so this is important. When squeezing it together, I got a nice melted goo to come out. The halves of the hips of this kit did not fit well together at all. They were kind of different shapes. Instead of trying to sand it together, I went with the Runner Putty technique. This helped fill in the gap and fit the two malformed parts really well together. While the hips were drying, I continued with the bottom torso. Just like the top, it was well fitted, so I used the thin glue technique again. After a day of drying, I went back to the hips. Removing the dried squeezed plastic, followed by sanding. I compared the sanded side to the other side, and you can see how good it looks. With all the seam lines done, you can call it finished or move on to detailing. If you're going to apply any makeup, pastels, having the seam lines removed adds a nice touch to it and makes it easier to do. Just make sure to sand it properly, since the makeup will build up on any grooves or rough spots left behind. Thank you very much for watching. Leave any questions in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them, or even make a follow-up short video demonstrating something more if you need. Also, don't forget to catch me on Twitch, where you'll see me using all these techniques on all my kits. Thank you again for watching and have a great day.